Welcome back to HFO Multifamily Marketwatch, your trusted source for information for apartment owners and investors. Multifamily Marketwatch is presented by Pacific Exteriors Northwest, a contractor specializing in siding and exterior envelopes and delivering exceptional quality and service for over 30 years. And by Gantry Incorporated, the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm.
Welcome back to Multifamily Market Watch. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have with us again Amy Vander Vliet. She's the regional economist for the Oregon Employment Division. Thank you. Oregon Employment Department. Thank you for coming. It's been a while. A lot of things have changed in our economy since probably the last time we sat, but I would love to hear your thoughts on how would you describe Portland's overall kind of economics, where we are today, then we'll get into some more specifics.
All right, sure. Yeah, so I would categorize or describe Portland's economy today as soft, perhaps a bit weak. We're down about 6,000 jobs or 0.5% over the year. So we're not doing as well as a lot of people would hope we'd be doing at this point. So I'd also categorize it as a broad-based weakness. It's just not one industry that's pulling us down.
It's not one sector that's driving us down.
No, it's most of them. It's pretty broad-based, some more than others. There are a couple of industries that are still growing, but it's pretty broad-based. So there's that. And so I like to look at the economy in sort of 4 phases right now. So a lot of people get caught up with pandemic recovery or year over year, but I see it as like 4 distinct phases. The first was the pandemic. We lost, about 170,000 jobs or something, a 15% decline, which is pretty average. Most metropolitan.
I was going to say that wasn't high or low,
no,
right?
It was right smack dab in the middle. It was the average of the 100 largest metropolitan areas and the nation. The nation was a little bit milder, but only by a couple tenths. It wasn't that big of a deal. So we lost jobs to the same degree as the average metropolitan area. Our recovery was slower. It took us about 2.5, almost 3 years to recover all those jobs. A lot of metropolitan areas were lagging us, but more than half of them were ahead in their recovery. But by about January of 2023, we had recovered all our jobs on a net basis. And then the following month, immediately after the recovery, the economy was like, okay, we're gonna take a breather. And we didn't do anything for about 1.5 years, 2 years.
So we recovered and then just kind of flat.
Yeah, we were treading water. We had some up months, some down months, but overall we were just kind of treading water, holding our own for up until about last fall. And then that brings us to phase 4, which is, we're still adding and losing jobs depending upon the month, but it's more of a decline than a holding steady. So we've lost jobs in about 6 of the last 12 months. So ever since October, we've been losing more jobs than gaining. So it's been a year, but it's been a pretty slow but steady decline that we're seeing.
Join the HFO community and get weekly multifamily intel. Click to subscribe.
And is that sector-wide too, or is there one that's driving more of that as well?
There are some sectors that are having steeper declines, like construction and manufacturing have had the steepest declines, the largest declines as well. But every single industry is down over the year and since October, except for a few.
And then with the top, say, 50 metros or 100 metros, where do we rank in terms of that? Are we now, like you said, from job growth during pandemic, we're kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
The recovery, we recovered now. It's, I'm sure we're falling down the list.
We are. If you look at the year-over-year job growth of or decline of 0.5%, that puts us in the bottom 10 of the nation's largest metropolitan areas. Des Moines and St. Louis have seen the sharpest declines at about 1%. The nation as a whole, the average large metropolitan area is up 0.9%. So they're 0.9%, we're 0.5%. So we're in the bottom 10 in terms of year-over job growth. But if you want to go looking back further, I like to also look at what we're doing compared to where we were right before the pandemic hit.
Okay.
So when you look at that and you compare us to February 2020, right before the pandemic, we're still in the bottom 20th percentile, but we're not number 7. We're number 17 or something like that. It's we look a little bit better when you take into account where we were before the pandemic. But it's been that last year of slowing job growth that has impacted us relative to other 60 metropolitan areas out of 100 have slowed the growth has slowed in the last year compared to the last 2 years. So everyone is, or the majority are seeing a decline in job growth rates, but it's just a little bit sharper.
So we
here in
had kind of
Portland.
the rebound out of the pandemic, got the jobs back, and now since the last year, it's kind of been a general slowdown.
Yeah.
Different metropolitan areas are getting hit more than others, so.
Yeah, and others are doing great. I mean, Austin and Dallas, I think, are going gangbusters. They're like 15-20% above where they were before the
Right.
pandemic. But there's also, it surprised me when I found this out, but the other metropolitan areas that aren't fully recovered from the pandemic, we are just barely. The last couple of months of declines have put us right where we were. But Boston, Minneapolis, San Jose, and San Francisco, of course, but those metropolitan areas haven't recovered their pandemic losses. And when I
Still
think
below pandemic levels.
yeah, or pre-pandemic levels, sorry.
Pre-pandemic,
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think of Boston and Minneapolis, I think that they are doing pretty good. I mean, historically they have, right? But
Right.
apparently they're still struggling as well.
And when you look at Portland, do you look at Clark County and Vancouver on that, or is it, you do? Okay,
Yeah.
so this includes, yes. and
It's a
it's-
seven county metropolitan
Right.
area.
And then is there certain counties that are doing much better than others, or is this recovery? I mean, we always hear the recovery always happens in Washington County with the high tech in Silicon Forest or job growth. And this coming out of the Great Recession, it really seemed like it was concentrated. Multnomah County, we had a lot of incomes went up and job growth there.
Yeah.
What's this recovery or slowdown kind of? There's certain pockets within the city that are doing better than others.
Yeah, it's definitely different depending upon the county and depending upon what time frame you're looking at, right?
Right.
So right now, like Multnomah County was hit hard, and it's still, I don't know, 6 or 10% below where it was before the pandemic. So Multnomah County has not recovered. When we talk about recovery, we're talking about growth in the surrounding counties.
Okay.
Up until recently. And now we're seeing actually declines in Washington County, and that's largely due to high tech. So Clackamas County, I think, is pretty flat. So it hasn't been now, it's gone from being a recovery around Multnomah County to a recovery like in Clark County and, Yamhill and, Clackamas to some degree. So it's definitely changed, but Multnomah County is still trailing by far.
And then, there's talk, well, now we're, shut down. I mean, how important is, federal jobs in the areas, from a recovery? Are we higher than most other metro areas? Are we in the middle, lower? What does that factor in any of this?
Not so far. I mean, it's always going to factor when people lose jobs, especially these are high-paying jobs. They
Right.
pay like $160,000 a year compared to something like $74,000 for all industries. So, but we only have about 20,000 federal jobs.
So it's not a huge number.
No, it's like 1.5%.
Okay.
And that's actually lower than the average metropolitan area, which is closer to like 2%, maybe 1.9. And then also rural Oregon is a lot more dependent on federal employment. So when you talk about federal employment and declines, it's going to have a greater impact and a more painful impact when you get into the rural
Get outside of the
areas
metropolitan area.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we hear a lot about here, population decline, lack of, out-migration, low birth numbers. I mean, how as an economist, what are you looking at that? What does that, looking forward, does that change kind of your outlook, or what does that tell you in terms of trends moving forward?
It's all tied up. It's so complicated. So, or intertwined, I should say. So we lost population for the first time in decades
Right.
immediately after the pandemic. I'm talking Portland metropolitan, the 7 county as a whole, and Multnomah County especially. Multnomah County lost about 15,000 people, or at least the net
Which is like
out-migration.
the first time in,
I don't know how long. I mean, it's never been a strong growing county because it's a lot of the population growth has occurred in like Clackamas and Clark counties. The counties have more room to grow, and they're the commuter counties and things like that. But anyway, yeah, it was very, very unusual for us to lose population, and that has hindered our recovery. And the population has started to grow again in the metropolitan area as a whole, but Multnomah County, it declined by 10 and then 3 or 5 or whatever, 15,000 jobs or 15,000 people over 2 years, and now it's just flat right now for the last couple of years.
so we're not seeing the recovery coming back in population growth. And if it does, like you said, it sometimes is going to these other counties.
It's going to be outside the county. Yeah. It's called the donut effect, because a lot of the people who have left left Multnomah County have out-migrated, have stayed within the metropolitan area.
Right.
They moved to Washington County. They moved to Clackamas County, we did also have a lot of people move to Bend. But the vast majority stayed within the Portland area, and it's called like a donut effect. So you have the emptying of the inside,
middle,
and then the bolstering or the enlarging of the outside. So people who left Multnomah County, and city of Portland's like 70% of Multnomah County, so you can say Portland, stayed in the greater metropolitan area. And if they didn't stay in the greater metropolitan area, they stayed in the state. And you saw a lot of people, they moved to Bend and they moved to the coast. So remote work is showing up in those numbers. And then we also had a couple thousand people who went to Arizona and Dallas. So that tells me they're moving for economic reasons. Like Intel has a big presence down in Arizona.
Right, so they're moving for not just remote work, it's something a little bit more, yes.
Yeah.
So what is that, trying to project forward, do you see some sectors here that are going to drive the recovery, or are we still in this transitional period of trying to get our footing?
I think we're still on the downside of this current business cycle. And like I said, the nation is seeing some weakness too. They're still growing, but they're not growing nearly as quickly as a year or two ago. So I think for now we're in a period of decline, and I expect to see losses through the end of the year. We still haven't seen the announced layoffs at major local companies show up in the numbers yet, because they're, the federal government layoffs, some of them have worked their way through the numbers, but there's still some people out there who are still considered employed. They have severance or something like that. But anyway, those declines are going to start showing up in the numbers later in the year. Major announcements by Intel and Nike, some of them have taken effect, some of them haven't. So those will show up in the numbers.
So we'll start seeing those in the numbers, though the announcement came 60 days ago, 90 days ago. It's going to take a while to filter through and come in.
Yeah. So I think we'll see continued losses, or at least not growth through the end of the year. And then coming out, it really depends on what the nation does. As the nation goes, so does Oregon, so does Portland. So to a greater or lesser degree, and in this case, it's a lesser degree. So I think that if we're in a manufacturing jobs recession right now. It's not just semiconductors, it's all components. So semiconductors by far is down 12%. But I think that our population growth, and we anticipate to see the population growth continue and pick up. That'll help the recovery. I think that once manufacturing hits bottom and it starts to grow again, I think that will be super helpful to our recovery, and just a wait and see attitude about what the nation does. We have these taxes and tariffs and uncertainty, and what's policy going to have, what impact is that going to have? And there's a lot of intangible things that are impacting the economy right now too, that for me, it's sort of like a wait and see how are they going to manifest themselves.
What's like you said, you work for the Oregon Employment Department. Do legislators lean on you guys for numbers on this? And with a state that's so dependent upon income tax and not having a sales tax, and when you have low employment numbers, the forecast is not great from state coffers, so to speak. Is there a recognition of that in Salem? Like, we've got to do something, or do they have those conversations with you?
I'm sure they have conversations around our data.
Yeah.
Not like policy discussions with us, probably not so much, because we stay out of the policy things. Right. I do know that, at least for now in the short term, even though we're seeing a decline in employment, we're seeing the stock market's doing great. So capital gains, that's going to really help the budget outlook. And I think they acknowledged that in their last forecast. So they are worried about the softening economy, but they're also thinking, well, it might turn around next year and we have these capital gains taxes, so maybe it's not going to be as dire as you would think, given the job losses or given the soft economy. I don't know. Right.
And then what about some of the other metropolitan? I know you do a lot with, like Bend. Like you said, there was a lot of, from the pandemic, working from remotely, a lot of people moving to Bend. Is some of that now coming back, that they're redispersing, or you think when they go, they're going to stay there? And
I don't know. I don't know. And the latest data we have is through 2023, and I could have gotten 2024 data, except the census is shut down.
I heard that.
So it's going to be
tough to get data right now.
I know. I was looking last week in preparation for this, and I pulled up the census, and it was just blank. Yeah. There wasn't even a message. It was just blank. So I don't know. I don't know if people who have moved out of the area are going to move back in, but I do know that population growth is picking up. And so I think, that our population growth is
And is that
Almost.
immigration coming in?
Yeah.
It's
I
all
mean,
immigration
yeah.
coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the other source of population growth is when births outnumber deaths.
Right.
And
We're not doing
doing that
that.
anymore. So, yeah.
And is the population growth coming from, is it still continued from California? Are we getting it from other states, from the immigration coming in?
I don't know. Ask the census.
Okay.
No, but historically, no, I have old data. Historically, it has been from Washington and California,
Right.
and the latest numbers I see we have more people coming from Seattle than people here leaving for Seattle. So I was looking at a city by city basis, and I'm sure there's economies in California or areas in California
The same.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, I mean, what do you think the biggest challenges are for the economy moving ahead for this region?
Oh, okay. Well, for the region, like I said, as the nation goes, so does Oregon, so does Portland. So starting at that 30,000-foot level, I think the challenges, the headwinds right now in the economy are, one, uncertainty, because businesses don't know what's going to happen with the fiscal policy, with taxes, with tariffs. I mean, they're just like, what's going on here? And it's not as uncertain as it was a few months ago,
But there's still some uncertainty.
there's still uncertainty, and
Right.
businesses hate uncertainty, and so they're going to like hold tight before they make any big investment or hiring decisions. There is tariffs. That's a threat, I think, both nationally and especially locally, because Oregon is such an export state.
Right.
So if there's any sort of trade war or retaliatory tariffs that
We
happen,
may have more of an effect. It may have a bigger
Yeah.
effect here than in other parts of the United States.
yeah, and I've heard the short-term tariffs could be a kind of a boost to the economy, but I think over the long term, it might be more of a drag because it's going to increase costs and supplies and things like that, the cost of supplies. So that is a headwind. I think that immigration policy will affect the national economy and probably to a greater degree Oregon's economy, because we depend a lot on immigrants for international migration for employment in agriculture and services and construction. And if those people aren't coming here, if they're afraid to come here, or they can't come here, or they're being kicked out, those employers are going to be suffering. They're not going to be able to find workers. We've already seen that happen. You heard about the Hood River cherry harvest. They couldn't harvest,
Not able
right?
to, yeah.
And then you have the H-1B, $100,000 fee on those visas. And I don't know how much Oregon or Portland depends on these folks relative to other areas, but we have a lot of H-1B folks here. And these are highly educated, highly skilled people who come from abroad. They work in Oregon at Oregon companies in positions that are hard to fill. That's, I think, one of the requirements to get one of these visas is you can't fill it, domestically. So these are really smart, really productive members of society, and if they can choose not to pay $100,000, I mean, they might, but they might not. So I think that's a threat.
And our location and our industries, we are highly susceptible to, those kind of things, like you said, maybe more so than other metros or other economies.
Yeah, I can't compare us with any sort of certainty to other metropolitan areas, but I do know that we have a lot of white collar jobs here, which is the professional, the highly educated kind of jobs. We have a lot of engineering jobs out, like Intel. They're just not manufacturing. There's a lot of R&D out there, and so they have a lot of H-1B. I mean, the H-1B by company is public knowledge, so it's no secret that Intel
It's a high user of that. Yes.
Yeah, they recruit. They have a lot of engineers there, and a lot of, and also hospitals and OHSU. They have a lot of. They apply for a lot of H-1B visas to fill their medical professional needs. So yeah.
Well, hopefully we get some positive wins coming. Like you said, it's been a tough. Like you said, we recovered, and then it seems like we flat, and then kind of on a downward trend a little bit. So thank you for taking the time to come speak with us, and we'll be looking at, again, people want more information, you can get it on the website below. And again, thank you, Amy, for coming here and sharing some insight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is a member of Global Real Estate Advisors. Learn more at grea.com.
Love the insights? Tap the like button and click subscribe. It helps us bring more multifamily news straight to you.